Hi, my name is Joe Jackson. I'm a journalist, author, interviewer, broadcaster, and podcaster. And I'm recording this introduction to my latest podcast on December the 8th, 2023. And I'm speaking from my home in Dublin City, Ireland, where the funeral of Shane MacGowan took place today. It fired in me many feelings, mostly shadowed, reminding me, for example, that the world of rock music and the world of Irish music in particular lost three great talents this year. Christy Dignam, lead singer with Aslan, Sinead O'Connor, and Shane MacGowan. I am, as I said, a journalist, so I understand why when each of these musicians died, all of whom, incidentally, I interviewed, and one of whom I knew socially also, namely Sinead. But, as I was saying, I understand why the media would be awash with tales of, say, Christy's heroin addiction, Sinead's early troubled family life, and Shane's use of drugs and alcohol. I've even talked with all three about such subjects. But in this podcast, which is the first in which I've drawn together three previous podcasts, I want to focus on the music they originally loved and that, to a great degree, shaped their lives, and by extension, I guess, ours. Shane MacGowan and I talked about that as far back as 1994 from my weekly interview slot in the Irish Times. But 6 years later, remembering how much my life had been changed as a child when I sat in a cinema and sang along with Elvis's Wooden Heart and felt I was flying into outer space, and then on my 10th birthday when I had a similar out-of-body experience after encountering rock and roll for the first time in one of his old singles called I Need Your Love Tonight, I based a radio series called Under the Influence on the premise of bringing musicians back to where it all began for them musically. Yet, I don't necessarily want this podcast to be chronological, so let me start circa 2000 with a clip from Sinead O'Connor, simply because it turned out that she as a child had a similar experience listening to Elvis sing Wooden Heart. Copyright laws preclude me from playing the actual song, but no matter. I just wanted to bring it all back home for all three musicians to where music first gave meaning to their lives. Thank God it did, because their music now gives meaning to ours. And if there is a heaven, you can bet your ass that all three will be having what we Irish call a hoolie tonight. Let it begin.
Sinead O'Connor, one of the first albums you ever loved was a French version of Elvis's 40 Greatest Hits, and one of your favourites was this song, and you can sing along if you want. Great stuff. Sinead sang in English and Elvis sang in German. Who cares? Okay, you once said that you realised even when you were only a kid when you heard that album, and you got this sense from Elvis that he was angelic.
Yeah, that he wasn't quite human. A lot of the artists that we've been talking about are people who feel like that about that they sort of appeared almost from God only knows where, that were very unusual, obviously, and even obviously how he looked and everything is quite angelic looking, but there was just something about his personality and everything as well that wasn't quite human.
But you also would have later realised, and many did, that Elvis was incredibly sexy.
I actually didn't, because I was at the age where I was so young that wasn't a factor.
Right.
In the whole attraction to him. It was really his voice and yeah, how he looked, but it wasn't a sexual thing, but he just looked angelic.
And even later, when you became aware of such things, you didn't look on him that way?
No, actually, never. No.
Okay, so Elvis the angel. But you also liked Elvis the rocker singing something like Jailhouse Rock.
Yeah, Jailhouse Rock is probably my favourite really of everything that he does.
Why? Yeah, so. I think you once said that it was because he could, and I can quote you here, he could take something like being in prison and make it seem
exactly.
joyful.
That it was a story about people in a terrible situation making it fun, and despite anything, and the best way sometimes to get revenge is to be happy and have fun. Do you know what I mean? So,
and dance with a wooden chair.
Yeah.
So you like Elvis as a rocker too, as well
as the but I love obviously the whole look of him as well, that whole rock look, the black leather gear and the hair slicked back and all that stuff. Like I definitely wanted to look like him. Do you know what I mean? If I ever grew up, which I haven't.
Okay, all right. But you also said that apart from just being that kind of macho rocker, he had that vulnerable and sensitive side, which is something that a lot of people miss.
Yeah. God, you'd want to be blind really though to miss it, wouldn't you?
What, sensitivity?
Yeah. Like he definitely had it in his voice, but certainly in his eyes and how he looked and everything too. Yeah.
When did you I don't want to go into the details, but you have spoken very often of how you felt you had a troublesome childhood. When would you have felt that music can give me wings to fly above that, or give me a sense of release beyond all that?
When my brother Joseph came home when I was 11 with a copy of Slow Train Coming, the Bob Dylan album, and I heard Precious Angel, and that just blew my mind and rocked my world and streaked through my universe.
Was that the first time you realised music can take you beyond whatever shadows are in your own home life or heart?
I think I always did to a certain extent. Like my parents were both very musical and both were singers, but they had a very broad range of musical taste as well. So there was a kind of a soundtrack going on right from the age of 0. As soon as you were born, you were in a house listening to records. In fact, while my mother was pregnant, we were all listening to records. You know, so my mother was very into John Lennon.
Okay.
So from the time I was a tiny baby, he had been a presence. Do you know what I mean? And she was also into John McCormack, and my father was into like we used to call him Knickerbockerini just to drive my dad mad, but you know, Boccherini and all that kind of stuff. So we were hearing things right from a very early age, and I think particularly the things that my mother was listening to were more rock and roll and kind of funky. Do you know what I mean? And John Lennon and stuff like that.
So
and the Beatles were obviously always in the background hugely. Like we used to drive along in the car singing Yellow Submarine when I was tiny. Like, you know.
And we're going to play Precious Angel. Why that?
I guess just because it's the first tune I heard off that album, and it is probably the song of all songs that just completely and utterly changed my whole world and made me at the age of 11 want to be a singer, and not only want to be a singer but want to be a priest and want to be, you know, someone who represented spirituality in the world, you know.
Okay.
Christy Dignam, welcome to Under the Influence. I've just read your biography, and this is Christy Dignam. And I saw the line, it was my dad who gave me my first love of music. So are we going to kick off with John McCormack?
Yeah, well, that's where it all started off with me. You know, he used to make the dinner on a Sunday. I used to never see my dad. He's in a poet store in CAE, a coach trimmer. So he worked in overtime a lot, and I used to see him because he'd be gone to work when I'd be getting up, and he'd be in bed by the time he got back. So Sunday was the day we saw him, and he used to do the dinner on Sunday, and he'd put on his John McCormack album, or Enrico Caruso. So I used to listen to all that stuff, you know, and to me, to this day, I still have a great fondness for it. I love it, you know.
But did that collide with your love of rock and roll, or were you even listening to rock and roll at the time?
I didn't even know what rock and roll was then,
Okay.
you know. To me, I remember coming out singing, there was this song called Your Tiny Hand is Frozen. And I remember singing that, and the lads on the street would be singing kind of Slade songs, or, you know. And I used to say, no, but you not hear this one. You're looking at me like it's some sort of from space.
What? We have to. They were looking at you how?
Like it's some sort of space cadet, you know. So.
But at the same time, I mean, you did music of Slade. When you were coming of age, it was music of Slade, and it was. I know there's another guy who I think is sorely underrated that you said most of your mates were singing the songs of, and you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, well, Gilbert O'Sullivan. That was, I kind of mentioned that in the book, and the way it came out was as if I was not in Gilbert. To me, it was one of my first, and to this day, I still think he's one of the most underrated songwriters on earth. You know, and there's two artists, well, 3 in the world that when I listen to their music, I feel so inadequate. I want to stop. You know, and
Okay.
Gilbert is one of them. You know.
Okay, why don't we kick off? Would Gilbert be a good place to start?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, and don't have Alone Again, because that'll have us all crying before the show even gets started. So what do you...
Well, Nothing Rhymes. That's a cracker.
It's great. It's a great... The lyrics, again, these rolling rhymes and all that.
Yeah, it's the way he fits lyrics in, you know. One drink of my bonfire, I've been a good boy, I'm your friend, and a while in the course of my duty, I perform an unfortunately. Would you varnish me so unbelievably so? Never again will I make that mistake. Like this feeling inside me could never deny me the right to be wrong if I choose, and this pleasure I get from say winning. And it's just as a sing-song. If I spoke those lyrics, there's a sing-song thing. But he doesn't go, there was a man with a cat who wore a black hat.
Right.
He puts,
Right.
he has a thing with shoes and about the yous in one of his songs. Like he has yous as in you people, you know. Things like that. He does things that I think anybody else of a lesser talent would sound absolutely cheesy down. But because he's so talented, you know, the cheese doesn't come near it, because cheese is so far from your kind of frame of mind, you know.
Okay, so I think we should give Gilbert a break, because, I mean, when you were rolling off those rhymes there, I was thinking if Bob Dylan had written that, it'd be regarded as a classic.
Absolutely,
But poor old
yeah.
Gilbert, who, let's not forget, is Irish and was one of the first Irish rock stars, so let's hear Gilbert O'Sullivan.
Yeah, and like just before you go into the Nothing Rhymes, like he's trying to say that nothing's fitting together in the world, and it's a bit confusing to him. And how he describes that is, you know, nothing old, nothing new, nothing ventured. nothing older than time, nothing sweeter than rhyme, nothing physically, recklessly, hopelessly blind, and it's nothing rhymed, you know. And it's like nothing's rhyming here. What's going on? And for, like, he's not saying, you know, there's a kid out there not eating food and it's not right, and there's a bloke without a job and that's not right. He's saying it in a very kind of, you know, symbolic way, and he does it beautifully, you know. Here you go, Gilbert.
That's a pretty good start, Christy. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Christy Dignam. You were mentioning there that, I mean, not everybody I know would read Gilbert O'Sullivan's lyrics in that sense, but I know that also the social echoes in Bob Dylan's work had a big impact on you. And your dad, I believe, used to talk about stuff like this. So it seemed right to you. You hooked in at that level.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, one thing my dad gave me, you know, and I've mentioned this again in the book. I hate saying that because I feel like I'm plugging, you know. But anyway, he had this vibe with the clergy, you know, and he gave us a healthy
anti questioning.
Well, basically what happened was he was kind of very poor as a kid, you know, and his mother used to give a shilling to the church collection every week, and he was saying there was times he wouldn't have money for food, but the church got their shilling, you know. And when his mother died, they were getting the priest to come round to give her the last rites or whatever, or the ninth, and they hadn't got the half crown or whatever, and the priest wouldn't come. And I remember that turned him off kind of the clergy, and he was always telling us about how much land he owned as a kid growing up, you know. So to me, you know, he gave it, and he also, like, he was very conscious of injustices and stuff, and he gave us a healthy kind of way of looking and questioning things without just accepting them on face value, you know. So I was listening to music and loved music, and I remember hearing somebody saying there's two types of music, good and bad music. So to me, you know, a good Slade song is as good as a good John McCormick song or whatever, you know. So anyway, I thought most songs were about boy girl kind of thing, you know. And then I listened to The Times Were Changing, the Bob Dylan album, and to me, to hear the song that the lyrics were as if not more important than the actual melody of the song was a complete revelation. It was like a watershed, and I thought, hold on, you can write here about the stuff that's frustrating and kind of angering me now as a teenager. I can actually put that to music. It doesn't have to be about boy girl and Johnny met Mary at the dance hall kind of thing, you know. So that was a huge, and that was that day I made the decision to dedicate myself to music, you know, and being, you know, writing songs.
I don't know about you, but ever since I was 14 or so and realised that a song by Elvis Presley called Lonely Man seemed to be able to articulate better than I could feelings I had, such as the loneliness after my parents parted, music has spoken for me from a core level. Some of Shane's songs do that for me, as they do for millions of people, one of whom was, at the time of this interview, Christy Moore. It probably still is. And I told Shane that, hoping to find out what singers and songwriters and writers and artists did that for him. I interviewed Christy, and in the Times he said you speak for him. That you're Christy Moore. He said you give a tilt to a lyric or a worldview that speaks for something he can't say. So who says that for you? You know what I mean? He felt...
I don't know what you mean, then.
Christy feels that your view on the world, your view on love, on relationships, it comes from just the tilted angle that he identifies with. You know, and it's not straight down the line.
Yeah.
So it can be a twist you give a lyric, which seems to be very gentle and poetic, and then you give it that tilt of humour. You know what I mean? And Christy said, wherever he's singing from, I feel it in there.
Yeah.
So what I'm asking you is, who does that for you, or who would do that for you? Or it doesn't have to be singers, obviously. It can be a writer.
Oh, I suppose Lou Reed would be one, you know. Ronnie Drew.
Yeah.
You know, and Luke Kelly when he was around. Hendrix is always very special to me.
Yeah.
Still is very special
Right.
to me. A lot of great jazzmen, you know, like Charlie Parker.
Yeah.
And Train.
Yeah.
And, you know, yeah, the Blue Note catalogue sort of thing.
The Blue Note catalogue, yeah.
And like, and also sort of like great rock and roll singers like, and soul singers like which are singer-songwriters like Sam Cooke and
Yeah, yeah.
people like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know,
Who's
Smokey
Robinson? Yeah. As Dylan called him, one of the best pop poets.
What?
Dylan called him one of the best pop
Much
poets.
better pop poet than Dylan.
Think so, yeah? Why? Because he's purer. It's a purer line.
Because he's good.
Yeah. But you don't appreciate Dylan as the so-called greatest song poet of our generation and every other generation? No. Okay. Well, what to you is poetry and a lyric?
I don't think about
Do you
things
not?
like that. You know, I think all this poetry thing is.
I don't mean poetry as.
Excuse me, pretentious.
All right. Well, maybe I meant just poetic or truthful. That's what we're talking about, the music who moves you at that level. If the word poetry is wrong for it. I mean, when a lyric works on that level, if Dylan's doesn't, can you easily identify what makes it work?
It doesn't have to be a lyric. I mean, like although Hendrix did write great lyrics, he spoke with his guitar as well. You know what I mean?
And Coltrane speaks.
Train and Parker, they didn't write lyrics at all.
Sure,
you know
sure,
what I mean?
sure.
They spoke with their horns. You know.
Right. Yeah. So
and there's loads of other guys that did, you know what I mean? Like and then there's people like Elvis and other great rock and roll singers and black and white.
okay. So you don't like the
It's essentially mundane lyrics, you know what I mean? And but by their performance, you know, made you fine singer, you know.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the word poetry is wrong for that. I think a pretentious way to describe it. So when your lyrics are thus described, do you just say pain in the arse? That's not what they're about? Because a lot of people do say that about your lyrics. Do you not like them being thus described as?
Well, no, there's the lyrics, you know.
All right.
Poetry is something you read or recite, you know.
Right.
You can recite with music in the background, but lyrics are
To be sung.
Or to be sung
Yeah.
along to the melody of the music. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Yeah. It's a different discipline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally different thing. Or a musician,
Yeah.
songwriter,
But
and
isn't
singer.
Hi, this is Joe Jackson, and thank you for listening to this edition of the Joe Jackson Interviews podcast. And if you want to read any of the articles I wrote about those artists, check out my website, joejacksoninterviewer.com.